Welcome to this tutorial on using the PIAAC data. This is the third video of a three-part series describing the PIAAC data and its components. The PIAAC databases are available in three modes, with the PIAAC Data Explorer, called the PDX or the PIAAC IDE, and there are two versions of these, one residing at the OECD and another one residing at NCES. The one at the OECD includes data for Australia and Russia, but excludes the data for Cyprus. The one at NCES includes the data for Cyprus, but excludes the data for Australia and Russia. There's also the public use files called PUF. These are available from the OECD. And the restricted use files, also called RUF, and these are available from NCES. In separate videos, we give you information about how to access and download this data. The data are accompanied by a large set of documentation. Their frameworks for the background questionnaires, the literacy, numeracy, and problem-solving and technology-rich environment scales. Their background questionnaires, their international and national reports. There's an extensive technical report. Their descriptions of the proficiency levels. Their codebooks that accompany the public user files and the restricted user files. Their derived variable scripts, and their compendia for background and cognitive variables. All these are available from either the NCES and OECD websites. As we mentioned earlier, in a separate video, we show you how to access all this data from the OECD and the NCES website. A few pointers to help you navigate to the extensive dataset or databases. There are national entities that are OECD members, and you'll see Australia, Austria, Canada, and you'll see the three-letter code that identifies those national entities. There are also subnational entities that participate, like Belgium, Flanders. Within the United Kingdom, we have England and Northern Ireland, and those are separate countries, yet under not the entire United Kingdom participated, so they're marked separately. There's other entities of countries that are not OECD members yet, but who are still participating in these studies. To identify the countries, you would use the variable country ID, which holds a numerical code for each national entity, and some of them will have also a value for country IDE, which distinguishes subnational entities, if there's any one present. So for example, you will find the code there separating Belgium, the Belgian French from the Belgian Flanders, and also Canada, English, and French-speaking communities. Here's an example of an exhibit used by the OECD, where you see the countries listed along the column, and they're separated by OECD members, partner countries, and then subnational entities. The public user files and the restricted user files come in two formats. One, SPSS, which is available for versions 11 or later. And these have the full dictionary information, variable labels, value labels, missing value definitions, variable measurement levels, and all variables are represented numerically. And we'll talk about this later. And this is in contrast to SAS, where SAS identifies missing values using letters or characters. Then there are SAS datasets, and these are standard compressed files for Windows environment, encoded in Unicode UTF-8, and they're accompanied by an equivalent named SAS file that includes syntax to assign formats. And again, this is in contrast with how SPSS works. SPSS includes all the metadata for the variables as part of the file, where SAS maintains these variables, this information in separate files. In terms of the records included in the analysis, in the analysis files for reporting and the public use data, the records had to meet the target population definition, meaning be 16 to 65 years of age, and this is for the internationally comparable sample. They had to be completed cases, and they had to pass validation and adjudication and weighting checks. In terms of completed cases for each person, we need to know the gender, the age, educational level, and they have to have attempted some of the items in the test, or in the cases of when the person didn't speak the language of the test, we just require the minimum background information. This included cases with partial or minimal information, like those with, like I mentioned earlier, with literacy-related non-response cases, and breakouts with sufficient information for psychometric modeling. Records excluded from the analysis files are those that are out of scope, non-interviews, meaning sample persons who were not interviewed due to refusal or other reasons, cases that were deemed to be falsified, respondents with less than the minimal required background items, and that's age, gender, highest level of education, and employment status, respondents with age and gender that was not collected in the case of literacy-related non-response, and a few cases with anomalies or otherwise unclear origin or quality. There's some differences between the PDX or the PIAAC Data Explorer and the public user files. They basically contain different sets of variables. And this is because some variables can be analyzed with tools that are outside of the Data Explorer, but the Data Explorer has certain limitations as to the types of variables that it can analyze. So variables that include information about processing of the processing information or log data, response to the individual items are not included in the Data Explorer, but they are included in the public user files. The majority of the variables included only in the public user files relate to the individual cognitive item scores and process information. There's a large number of background questions and variables that are included in the public user files, and these are education and training variables, and those are identified with the letter B at the beginning of the variable name. Current status and working history identified with the letter C. Current work, including earnings, those are identified with the letter D. Previous last work, identified with the letter E at the beginning. Skill use, work at work and in everyday life, identified with the letters F, G, and H. And general background variables identified with the letters I and J at the beginning of the variable name. One thing to note is that the database underlying the Data Explorer and the public user files was subject to some suppressions at the cell or column level, meaning some values for some individuals could have been suppressed and the information for some variables could have been suppressed entirely for a country. The majority of these instances relate to, but are not limited to, age, language, country of birth, or region information, education information, occupation and industry information, original derived earnings, variance strata, and unit information. The suppressions differ between the PIAAC Data Explorer and the public user files. However, the main purpose of these suppressions was not to alter the results, but to protect the identity of those participating in the study. One of the consequences of suppression is that users might not be able to fully replicate particular tables, figures, and other exhibits in the international reports. A number of variables have been coarsened, and they will be identified with the suffix _C. And these were created to include the level of detail deemed suitable for public release by all or almost all countries. However, even when data have been coarsened, the results are statistically substantively equivalent. So there's no concern about getting statistically different results with coarsened data. There are several types of missing data that you will come across when working with the data. One of them is missing by design. These are questions that were not administered by design, questions not administered because they do not apply, or a question that a country did not participate in a component because a country did not participate in a component of the assessment. They're missing data due to the response process, and this has to do with respondents may have broken off the interview after it was started as a function of, for example, time, motivation, fatigue, or sensitive questions being asked, or a respondent may have explicitly refused to respond a question in a background questionnaire, or they may not have known the answer to a question with sufficient certainty. Last, there might be missing data due to logistics, processing, and analysis, and this has to do with erroneous routing in national versions of the background questionnaire that collected fewer data items for particular respondents than intended. Certain data items were not provided or suppressed due to confidentiality concerns, and a small number of values were obvious outliers, otherwise useless or erroneously coded in the original national databases, and these were converted to missing data. In this table, we show how the different missing data was represented in the corresponding files in SAS and SPSS. Notice how in SAS we use characters to represent missing data, whereas in the SPSS files we use numbers. It is worth noting that there was no attempt made to impute data when it was missing, with the exception of the income variable into broad categories. For more information about how the missing data was handled and the existence of it in the data files, please refer to the PIAAC technical report. Thank you for watching. For more information or comments about these videos, please write to egonzalez@ets.org. Thank you.
This video was made possible by the Institute of Education Sciences of the U.S. Department of Education, through Grant R305B160020 to Educational Testing Service. The opinions expressed are those of the authors and do not represent views of the Institute or the U.S. Department of Education.